Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay, I'll be right back. Just a second, just a minute.
We won't go anywhere.
He did say he was coming back today.
Yes, he did. And I have to leave at 11:15 to go up for my stress test. So I'm going to keep you on the phone or keep him on the phone and just listen in the car.
That's what I was figuring. I actually, when you didn't come on first, I thought, oh, maybe she already left or, yeah, okay, got it. Yes, I've done that where I've been in the car listening, so. Okay.
Yeah, and the other doctor called, his office called, the pulmonary guy called this morning. He said his office said he will call me tomorrow afternoon between 2 and 3.
Oh,
So I don't have to wait a week.
oh, good.
Yeah, he'll call tomorrow.
And then you'll know what kind of test.
Yeah, I'll know which kind of biopsy it's going to be.
Right. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you guys?
Well.
We are well. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
Okay. So the last few mitzvahs have been about actual forms of forbidden worship, Molech, Ov, and Yidoni. Molech, according to the Rambam, was passing a child through fire, a kind of baptism of fire. His description seems to suggest that the child is not killed. It's a kind of baptism of fire that's used to serve a particular pernicious kind of idol called Molech. Although Rashi, we saw that Rashi and others suggest that Molech seemed to be actual child sacrifice into fire, that there was a specific kind of idol that had like a furnace as part of it, and the child would be sacrificed into the furnace. And it's possible that there were different ways this was practiced in different places. And then we talked about Ov and Yidoni. The way the Rambam explained Ov, it sounds like what we would call a seance, although it was a specific form of seance, and therefore it wasn't clear whether all seances would fall under this prohibition. And so you might have to, if let's say somebody wanted to attend or observe a seance, they would have to have a lot of specifics clarified before it could be determined if it was permitted to go. And then we saw a kind of warning that really you shouldn't go to any kind of seance, but there might be some that might be constructed in a certain way that might get around a lot of the prohibitions associated with it, but still you probably should stay away from them. And then Yidoni, the way the Rambam characterizes it, it's a kind of prophetic experience induced with a bird bone in the mouth. And so engaging in these or engaging it as the Yidoni person or hiring somebody to do the Yidoni process, it seemed like they are both forbidden.
Rabbi Karsh.
Yeah. Hi, David.
Hi. This has to do with Moloch. I remember some sort of halakhic curiosity that if a person, that they seem to consider that the sacrifice to Moloch was for the benefit of their future fertility. So if a person passed some of his children through Moloch, sacrificed them to Moloch, then he was liable. But if he killed all of his children, then he wasn't liable because it was clear that his motive was not in order to do that. Do you recall? I recall reading that from some sort of reliable source.
Let's just go back to Moloch for a second.
But it makes motive an essential part of what the crime is, or whether there's a crime or not. Not a degree.
Let's see here. So here's the Rambam on Molech. Anyone who willingly, as a conscious act of defiance, gives of his progeny to Molech is liable for karet. If he did so inadvertently, he must bring a fixed sin offering. If witnesses were present and warned him, he would be stoned to death. Whoever gives of his progeny to Molech will surely die. The people will stone him. Which verse serves as a warning for his prohibition? Do not give of your progeny to Molech. Also, further on, it states, there shall not be found among you one who passes his son or daughter into the fire. What was done? Person would kindle a great fire, then take some of his progeny and give them to the priest who served the fire. After the child was given to them, the priest returned the son to his father to pass him through the fire at his will. The father of the child is the one who passes his child through the fire with the priest's permission. He passed him through the fire from one side to the other while carrying him, the father walking on his feet in the midst of the flames. Thus, the father does not cremate his son to Molech, as sons and daughters are cremated in the worship of other deities. Rather, this form of worship called Molech involves merely passing the child through the father. Therefore, if one prefers the service to a deity other than Molech, one is not liable. One is not liable for karet or stoning until one grieves over his son to Molech, passing him through the fire as he carries him. If he gives him over but does not pass him through the flames, or pass him through the flames without giving him over, or gives him over and passes him through the flames but does not carry him, he's not liable. He is held liable until he gives over. He is not held liable until he gives over some of his progeny and leaves some of his progeny, as implied by Leviticus, for he gave of his progeny to Molech some of his progeny and not the entire progeny. The prohibition against giving one's progeny to Molech includes both progeny of legitimate pedigree and illegitimate pedigree, sons and daughters, children and grandchildren. One is liable for giving over any of one's descendants because they are all included in the term progeny. In contrast, if one passed one's brothers, sisters, or ancestors through the fire, even if one caused oneself to be passed through the fires, one is not held liable. A person who passes one of his progeny through the fire while he is sleeping or blind is not liable. Okay, now let's go back to the part. This one, let's see here. Commentary. Right, so this is from a brisa. I'm assuming it's a brisa, not Avodah Zarah, I'm assuming. Okay, so that is the Kesef Mishnah, Lechem Mishnah. Right, so I'm not getting. Just see. Just looking through the commentaries here to see if they give some kind of underlying explanation. The Gemara is in Sanhedrin that talks about it. All right, let's see if it's gives it earlier. Just see here. Also in the tractate Croesus. Second. I mean, one of the things that appears from the Rambam and the commentaries here is that in order to be liable for the death penalty or kores, or to bring the korban, you have to do it in a way that would be considered actual service to Molech. And they had, the Molech people themselves had an etiquette that had to be followed in order for it to consider proper service to Molech. That also, the Or Sameach points out that if it was in a place where they actually kill the child, then you would be liable for murder for killing the child, even if you technically, let's say you didn't do it right according to the precepts of Molech, then it's in a place where you kill the child, clearly you would still be liable for murder. But according to the Rambam, that wasn't how it was generally done. It is a very weird thing because the most likely explanation for why you're not liable is because you haven't done the service properly. But it's funny that the Torah is explaining how to properly serve Molech. Yeah, so far, what it seems to me is that the reason that the person isn't liable is because they haven't successfully served Molech. So, in other words, the servants of Molech determine what is considered proper service of Molech, and that the Torah is just when the Torah is identifying the parameters, it's actually identifying the parameters from the rules of the proper service of Molech. That's what it seems like. But I agree. It's weird. The whole thing is weird. But it seems like since you haven't successfully served Molech according to the rules of service of Molech, then you are not considered to have violated the rules of this particular violation. We're going to see in Mitzvah 10, let's just look at Mitzvah 10 for a second here, that he prohibited us from inclining towards idolatry and occupying ourselves with its narratives, meaning to say into the study of spirituality. That means star X descends according to this description and then does such. And when they burn incense to Y and stand before it according to this description, it does Z, and that which goes in this way. For thought about these things and study with these types of expression is what arouses a person to seek them in their worship. So again, in a lot of these previous ones, you would have violated mitzvah number 10. So if you, for some reason, are a follower of Molech and you study the ritual, you would have violated number 10. In other words, it's not that you haven't done anything wrong. Let's say with the Molech one, if you did it in such and such way, where it says you're not liable for it, it doesn't necessarily mean you haven't violated any other commandments by doing it, but you're not liable to the death penalty or to bring a sin offering if you did it in such a way. And again, it seemed to me from a very quick survey of some of the commentaries that the reason you're not liable in the Molech one is because you didn't do it properly. So even though you may have had intent for it to do it, and we do see statements in the Talmud, like it'll say, if you have intent to transgress avodah zarah, that is considered like forbidden intent, and you are judged for your intent. Regularly, you're not judged for your intent when it comes to a crime, but when it comes to avodah zarah, for idolatry, you are judged for your intent. There is no punishment per se. In other words, you're not going to get any of the stated punishments, but it's considered, a transgression in the sense that you've done something wrong. And you would have violated mitzvah number 10, most likely, but you're not going to get the penalty for the specific penalty for handing your children over to Molech. That's not going to apply. You have other things like this. For instance, let's say you have two witnesses that come forward in court, and they are these witnesses are the reason that you kill somebody for some crime. Now, if two other witnesses came forward after the person was put to death, and those two witnesses say they couldn't possibly have seen what they claim to have seen because they weren't there. So we believe those two witnesses, but since the person was already put to death, these witnesses are not put to death. That's the rule in the Talmud. The rule in the Talmud is that if you have Eidim Zomamim, so these are witnesses that have been demonstrated to be false witnesses because two other witnesses tell us that they weren't there. They were with them somewhere else. So regularly they get whatever punishment would have been meted out to this offender or the alleged offender. So for instance, let's say they're in a case where this person would have owed $10,000, and they are the witnesses that said he owes $10,000. So now those two witnesses who've been perjured, the two that we have other witnesses who said they were with them somewhere else, those two witnesses now have to pay $10,000. Whatever they intended to happen to the accused happens to them. But the rule is that if they came forward and the person was already put to death based on their testimony, we do not put them to death. We do put them to death if the decision had been made, but they hadn't carried out the punishment yet. In that interim space between the judgment and putting the guy to death, witnesses came and perjured these two by saying they were with us. Then those two witnesses are put to death. So even though this is a case where they deserve to be put to death, but if the person was already put to death, they are not put to death. So you could have scenarios where somebody has done something terrible, and so terrible that if circumstances had been a little bit different, they would actually be put to death. But because the scenario is changed, they are not put to death. That doesn't mean that these people haven't done something terribly wrong, but they don't fit the criteria to put them to death. So that could be another, a sort of parallel kind of model for the case with Molech. The fact that they're not put to death in the Molech case, let's say he sacrificed all his children, so he's not going to be put to death. does not necessarily indicate that he hasn't done something terribly wrong. It just means that for whatever reason, he is not going to be put to death for it. And you would call that exeris hakosov, like a decree of the verse. Now, yeah.
I don't know if it's in the Gemara or not, but the primary reason that I thought that Chazal instituted I don't know, it has to be a gezerah kasub. It's because otherwise, and the Talmud uses it a lot of times, that it would lead to a infinite regress or an infinite chain. You come once, so you come a couple of years later. There's no closure. There's no legal closure to it, because at any time somebody could come by, and then somebody other comes, and then the other, and keep displacing the witnesses. Where would it end?
I don't know what you mean.
Well,
say that again.
Let's say I put the guy to death, and then witnesses come, and they say, no, we were with the witnesses. So then you execute them, and then somebody else comes up 2 months later and says, no, those ones that includes them of being aiding zoning, they themselves were aiding zoning, because those witnesses were with us. And you could have a chain that builds upon this; it would never end.
I do know. I must say that I don't know every Gemara that. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't come to mind every Gemara about Eidim Zomamim, but I do know that it's most often quoted as Exeris HaKosov. Asher Zomam Lasos Lo, that what they intended to happen to him and not what actually happened to them or something. It's actually Exeris HaKosov, but a decree of the verse. But it's possible that rationale is also given. But it wouldn't matter either way. It still could be a parallel. In other words, it could end up that you're not giving, the fact that you're not giving a capital punishment to somebody is not necessarily an indication that they haven't done something terribly wrong. So also, for instance, let's say you have one witness that comes against somebody, or you have several witnesses, but they're related, or circumstances are such that you are certain of about what happened, but you feel certain about what happened, but for technical reasons you can't convict this person. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the person hasn't done something terribly wrong. It just means that because of a decree of the Torah about how these things are meant to be carried out, you can't actually carry out the death penalty. So the fact that in the Molech case, the person made a great effort to follow through on Molech, but is not getting the punishment, I'm just suggesting that alone does not necessarily mean the person hasn't done something terribly wrong. It may just mean that for whatever reason, it doesn't qualify for the punishments. But you could have many cases where like even Rebbe Akiva and Rebbe Tarfon, when they're talking about how if they were on a Sanhedrin that was able to carry out the death penalty, they would ensure that the death penalty was not actually carried out, because they'd raise the bar for testimony. They'd make it so hard for somebody to qualify as a witness that you wouldn't end up with the result of a death penalty decree. That doesn't mean the person didn't deserve the death penalty. They just technically are not going to carry out the death penalty for whatever reason. So when you have a detail that because of that detail, they don't carry out the death penalty, that doesn't necessarily signal that the person hasn't done something terribly wrong. So again, let's say the reason for molech is because even the molech people would say you haven't successfully done the service. You know how we have, let's say, rules for tefillin. So let's say somebody's put on tefillin, but there's something wrong with the parchments inside that render them unfit. So we would say that even though the person had good intent, but they didn't technically fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin because the parchments weren't kosher. It's possible they have rules like that for molech, that molech has to be done in a certain way. And if you don't do it in a certain way, then you haven't successfully done molech. Now, this person had every intent to do it. So it could be that the person technically hasn't done it, even according to the molech people, and therefore he technically hasn't transgressed. That doesn't mean that he hasn't done something terribly wrong. That's all I'm saying. You have to, I'm not saying either way for sure, but I'm just saying the fact that you don't get kares or stoning or bring a sin offering doesn't necessarily mean that this guy hasn't done something terribly wrong.
I know, but the only thing is, according to the opinion, I guess, that I was trying to quote, it depends on essentially not on what the person did, whether it was up to, what do they call it, somebody's rules of order, but it was his internal motive, because it was in order to have the conduct.
Yeah, so I don't know where who said that part? Is that a quote from the Gemara?
I can't remember where it is, but I remember it made a deep impression on me. It was a whole lot.
If you could find that, I'd like to see it, because when I was, obviously it's discussed in the Gemara at length over there, and eventually we're getting to that Gemara in Daf Yomi again, and I've seen that Gemara, this discussion, but I don't remember details anymore. So I don't know. When I was looking in the halachic commentaries, they didn't bring that up, but that. So if you could find where it said that, then
Okay. Eternally
then
grateful.
we could look more into that.
Okay.
Right.
I have been under that.
Okay. But as you see here in number 10, and again, you have this notion mentioned in the Gemara that somebody who is thinking or planning a service of avodah zarah, that is already considered to be criminal, to be wrong. And over here you have even the study of it. The study of how it's done is considered wrong. These are not death penalty wrong, but they are considered to be wrong. So though I would assume those would both be also involved in the molech thing and in the ov thing and the Yidoni thing, and that these would all be considered connected. For thought about these things and the study of these types of expression is what arouses a person to seek them and their worship. And the verse that prohibited us from this content is his saying, "Do not turn to the idols." In the language of the Sifra in Kedoshim, halachic midrash, if you turn to them, you make them gods. And there they say, Rabbi Yehuda says, do not turn to see them. It is not even permissible to observe the appearance of the image's form and the thought of its construction, so that one not spend any time involved with any part of it. This chapter entitled Shoel Adam in Shabbat, in Tractate Shabbos, they said regarding writing that is under a picture or under a graven image, it is prohibited to read it on Shabbat. Regarding the image itself, even on a weekday, it's prohibited to look at it because, as it is stated, do not turn to the idols. What is the derivation from this verse? Rabbi Yochanan said, do not make a god from your minds. The prohibition about this very content, meaning about the prohibition of the thought of idolatry, has already been repeated, and that is his, God may be exalted, saying, take heed of yourself, lest your heart be seduced. This means to say that if you have your heart delve into it, it will bring you to veer from the true path and to become involved in its actual worship. He also said about this exact content, unless you lift your eyes to the sky. He did not come to forbid a person from seeing them with his eyes, but rather forbade the matter in which one relates to their worship with the interest of the heart. And likewise, his saying, lest you inquire about their gods, is forbidding the inquiry about the nature of their worship, even though one does not worship them. For this all leads to erring about them. And you should know that one who transgresses this is liable for lashes. This has already been made clear at the end of the first chapter of Eruvin, regarding that which they said that we give lashes for going outside the mixing of parameters, Erev Tchumin, and they gave a proof, his saying, let no man go out of his place. And someone asked and said, but how can they give lashes for a prohibition with the word al, when the commandment did not come with the word lo? So al and lo are both ways of saying don't. And they answered him rhetorically, and do we not give lashes for anything that comes from the word al? But if so, we would not give lashes for do not turn to idols. Behold, this indicates that we give lashes for this negative commandment of turning to idols. Now, exactly how you find that person guilty, would it be reading? Would it be talking about it? Would it be seeking out an expert on it? What would be the actual act that that led to this? Also, just want to look at how the Rambam describes this. This is in his codes. The essence of the commandment forbidding the worship of false gods is not to serve any of the creations, not an angel, a sphere, or a star, none of the four fundamental elements, nor any entity created from them. Even if the person worshiping knows that Hashem is the true God and serves creation in a manner in which Enosh and the people of his generation worshiped the stars originally, he's considered to be an idol worshiper. The Torah warns us about this, saying, lest you lift your eyes heavenward and see the sun and the moon and the stars and bow down and worship them, the entities which God apportioned to all the nations. This implies that you might inquire with the eye of the heart, and it might appear to you that these entities control the world, having been apportioned by God to all the nations to be alive, to exist, and not to cease in existence, as is the pattern of the other creations of the world. Therefore, you might say that it is worthy to bow down to them and worship them. For this reason, it commands, be very careful that your heart not be tempted to go astray and worship other gods. This implies that the thoughts of your heart should not lead you astray to worship these and make them an intermediary between you and the Creator. The worshippers of false gods have composed many texts concerning their service, describing what is the essence of their service, what practices are involved, and what are its statutes. The Holy One, blessed be He, has commanded us not to read those books at all, not to think about them or any matters involved with them. It is even forbidden to look at the image of an idol. Do not turn to the idols. In this regard, it states, be careful lest you seek and find out about the God, saying, how did they serve them? This prohibits inquiring about the nature of their service, even if you yourself do not serve them. This matter will ultimately cause you to turn to the false god and worship it as they do, as the above verse continued, so that I will do the same. All these prohibitions have one common thrust, that one should not pay attention to idol worship. Whoever performs a deed that reflects his concern with idol worship receives lashes as a punishment. So you see here, there has to be some kind of deed. The subject of false gods is not the only subject to which we're forbidden to pay attention. Rather, we are warned not to consider any thought which will cause us to uproot one of the fundamentals of the Torah. We should not turn our minds to these matters, think about them, or be drawn after the thoughts of our hearts. In general, people have limited powers of understanding. Not all minds are capable of appreciating the truth in its fullness. Accordingly, Were a person to follow the thoughts of his heart, it is possible he would destroy the world because of his limited understanding. What is implied? There are times when a person will stray after star worship and times when he'll wonder after God's oneness. Perhaps he is one, perhaps he's not. He might wonder what exists above in the heavenly realms, what exists below them, what is before time, what will be after time. Similarly, one might wonder about prophecy. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. May also wonder about the Torah. Perhaps it emanates from God, perhaps it doesn't. Since he may not know the guidelines with which to evaluate ideas that will lead him to the truth in its fullness, he may come to heresy. The Torah has warned us about this matter, saying, do not stray after your heart and eyes, which have led you to immorality. Each one of you should not follow his limited powers of understanding and think he has comprehended the truth. Our sages interpreted this warning, after your hearts refers to heresy, after your eyes refers to immorality. This prohibition, though severe, causing a person to be prevented from obtaining a portion of the world to come, is not punishable by lashes. So he suggests that, again, he did say you have to perform some act that indicates that you are looking into these things, but the prohibition here is even to read about them, to study them, to ask about them, and also includes looking at the idols. We could look at this more because obviously there's exceptions, and one of the exceptions is going to be to know how to respond to idolaters and how that works, etc. So, and it does, there are those who extend this to reading about things like atheism and the theory of atheists, like Richard Dawkins, many books or things like that. So is there a circumstance where you can read those things? Under what circumstance and for what purpose? The Rambam seems to be warning because a lot of people think they're smart, but they're not. A lot of people think they're informed, but they're not. And if you don't know exactly okay, so we'll look into this some more next on Monday. Also, our Thursday class, I'm very sorry, ladies, but something came up. I can't meet tomorrow at our regular Thursday morning. So we'll have to wait till next week for our Thursday morning. Also, let me think. I might have to tell you about the Monday because I might have to be with my father on Monday. So I may not be able to meet on Monday. So I'll let you know. I'll let you know what's going to happen about the Monday. Sorry about that.
Do keep
Okay.
us posted.
I will. I wish I knew all the things that are going on right now. All right. Be well, guys.
Rabbi, thank you.
All right. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Karsh.
Okay. You're welcome. Bye-bye.